So it was primarily Sinatra, Streisand, the Carpenters, until I was about 12 years old. I remember I saw a commercial for Elvis selling a compilation CD, and Teddy Bear was on it, and it was just all the singles, and I
Yeah.
convinced my mother to buy me that Elvis album, and that sort of set me in a completely different direction. But then, and then when I got my license and started driving again, everything sort of changed. I discovered beer, girls, and right about that time, while I was in high school, I heard about Bruce. I think I even, I think I tweeted this not too long ago that my first reaction to Springsteen was it's a cult and people are weird. You love it way too much. No way anything could be that good. And for years, like for from sophomore all the way through senior year, I just refused to listen to it because I just thought it was over the top.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today is my new friend, Vinnie Tripodi. How you doing, Vinnie?
I'm good.
Except
it was
for
close. It was actually Tripodi.
Tripodi. Okay,
yes,
Tripodi.
yes.
I should have asked that before.
That's okay.
Yes, that's okay. With the name, with a name like Jesse Jackson, I don't talk about it. Yeah. So tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a tech geek. I work for the Associated Press. It's a fun job.
Oh, okay.
I've had an opportunity to travel around a little bit to see Bruce domestically. Never internationally, but AP sort of afforded that. It was kind of cool. Been a fan since probably senior year of high school, so 40 years, if you can believe it. I am like everybody else, just sort of waiting for Bruce to reveal tour dates so we can start making plans and get out of the house and go see some shows.
Yeah, I've talked a couple of times. As we're recording this, the last Tuesday, my wife and I went and saw the Eagles, and cool. It was a lot of fun. And then on Friday night, she was out on a girls' trip, and so I went and saw Michael Nesmith and Mickey Dolenz doing a kind of farewell to the Monkees tour. Nice. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah, slowly but surely, there's a little bit of live music happening here in Dallas, and so we're all wearing our masks. We're all having to show our vaccination card as we go into the venue, and I have no problem with that. In fact, I'm happy to do it. I'm glad to do it. Yeah.
Me too. I'm ready. I'm ready to get the booster. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I live in Asbury, so I've been
okay.
I've been sort of inching my way into the live music scene little and little over the last few weeks. I went to that See Here Now festival last weekend, and
how was it?
And Pearl Jam. I had never seen Pearl Jam before, and they were every bit as good as you would think they would be. Really good band. Who else was there? So Patti Smith.
Yeah.
Great version of Because the Night.
Yeah, and I guess and Eddie and Pearl Jam did a couple of like My City in Ruins.
He did,
right?
Yes, he did. And he sparked a little bit of furor here in Asbury because they sound checked it the night before, and so everybody was obviously speculating that Bruce would show up for those shows.
Okay, but, yes.
Yeah, he never showed up at all during that weekend. It was disappointing, but still fantastic.
That's an interesting thought. And we talked about this like 4 or 5 years ago. And this was that. It's sometimes, people will buy tickets for an event with the hope that he would be there. and then when he doesn't show up, get disappointed, instead of treating it the way I would is, I want to see the event, period, right? And if he comes, that's kind of like a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right about that. I mean, I am certainly guilty of being sort of a little bit of a Bruce stalker over the
Yeah.
years, right? I mean, I've gone to places, to the Pony and on some rumor that Bruce might show, but
Sure.
you always want to enjoy yourself while you're there. So you got to take in whatever's happening. And just,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was telling this story to somebody else. I didn't see him till 2002. That was my first show. And it was the Rising here in Dallas. And Don Henley, speaking of the Eagles, at the time was living in Dallas. I think he still does, but he joined Bruce on stage and they did I Fought the Law.
Cool.
And then the next time I saw him was at Devils and Dust, and Jimmy LaFay joined him for My Oklahoma Home. So I was like, oh, so this is a deal now. I guess, I guess he just finds a local musician at every show and has them come back. And
That's great.
yeah. So when I was in Nashville, I was really, really during like the High Hopes tour, I was like, man, Nashville, there's got to be someone who's going to join him, right? And no one did. And it was a great show, but you just were thinking right there, someone had to, So.
You wonder, sort of what triggers his desire to call someone or not call someone, right? I mean,
yeah,
it seems kind of random.
It does. And I remember during the first Broadway run, Billy Joel was on one of the talk shows. I don't remember if it was Fallon or late night or whoever, but Jimmy, he was talking to whoever the host was and talking about going to see Broadway. And he said, I was there and he says, I was kind of waiting for Bruce to go, oh, and you're going to join me on stage, right? He says, because that's what we do. He says, that's what we do. We, you go meet somebody and they go, oh, you're going to join. He said, and he didn't invite me on stage. And I was a little bit till I saw the show. And then I went, oh, it's not that kind of show.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point.
It is. I mean, that's one of the things that's so impressive about Bruce is that he just seems to have a feel for the moment that he's in, and he knows exactly what needs to be done, what the moment calls for. And the guy doesn't seem to make mistakes about that either. He just seems to have a knack for just getting the best out of every moment that he's in.
Vinnie, when I remember during the second River tour, right? There was a lot of I found it humorous that there was a lot of people, not a percentage of people, complaining that he was doing the River shows, right? Like doing the whole album.
Right.
Like, hey, wait, yeah.
You're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then when he went over to Europe, his internal barometer said, I think I shouldn't do this. So let me go back to a normal. And then some of the same people were complaining like, well, my goodness, if I'd known he wasn't going to do it, I would have gone to, so, but I do think, and I think Steven has talked about this, that Bruce has this internal, like when to change up the set list and when that maybe we should, bring in some of the older hits or bring in, some of the new ones or, to pull what, obscure, something from tracks. So it is definitely Springsteen roulette. Like you're never know for sure what you're going to get.
That's for sure. That's for sure. He does it, and he does it in the middle of the show. And sometimes I'll be watching a song and think that was different. An inflection or something, right?
Yeah.
He just seems to always be aware in every single moment of what he's doing. Such command over his performance. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think I remember someone saying once there was, a bunch of kids showed up for Dancing in the Dark and someone was complaining about it. And my friend said, look, there's nothing that happens on stage that he doesn't approve. I mean, you quote unquote the boss, but he is the ultimate control freak about what happens on that stage from, first note to ending note. It is totally what he wants to happen.
No doubt. No doubt
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
All right. So Vinny, talk about growing up. Where did you grow up and what kind of music did you listen to?
Sure. So I grew up primarily in Hillside, New Jersey, which is in Union County, sort of right outside of Newark and not too far out of Manhattan.
Okay.
Had a short period of time in the middle there where I lived in Sayreville, New Jersey, right around the corner from Bon Jovi. In fact, there was one. Well, I was a crossing guard at our grammar school, and Bon Jovi. We were in fifth grade or something, and Bon Jovi was on his walking to school. It was like, I don't know, 8:45 in the morning, and his sixth grade, and he was smoking a joint with his friends.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I turned them in as the crossing guard, which which I look back and think, what was I thinking, But
Which you didn't know.
what did I know? I was
Mhm.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, so I turned John Bon Jovi in sixth grade for
So
smoking a joint.
that
And, anyway, so that
yeah,
was it's primarily Hillside, but
yeah.
my
So that reminds me of two stories. One, my dad tells the story that when he was stationed in Germany, one of his first tours in Germany was the same time that Elvis was there, and he busted Elvis and gave him a hard time because he was doing guard duty, and wasn't following everything. The second story is, and there is a local sports guy named Mike Reiner,
Mhm.
and he had been in a lot of bands, and they pick at him that he told Stevie Ray Vaughan he wasn't good enough to be in their band. And the reality was, when they quit busting his,
Yeah,
balls, the reality was he said he was 15 at the time. We were 19. The reason we didn't get him in the band was there's just not going to work a minor and us playing nightclubs.
right.
He says he said it was, you guys, I know you're picking at me, but the reality is, even at 15, we could tell how talented he was and
Right.
how you would love to have him in the band, but
He couldn't get in the venue.
yeah, a 15-year-old, when you're
Yeah.
playing clubs, yeah, but they love to tell the story. Oh yeah, you're the one that told Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah,
Right.
well, we'll call you later, right?
I always wanted to confront him at some point in my life and say, John, do you remember this?
Yeah.
He's got to remember that.
And that would be funny if he goes, yes, I hated you. And
Yes, I know. I'm like, I want to apologize now, 50 years later.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah. So anyway, I grew up in Hillside, and
what kind of music did your family listen to?
so it was primarily Sinatra, Streisand, the Carpenters, and then till I was about 12 years old, I remember I saw a commercial for Elvis selling a compilation CD, and Teddy Bear was on it, and it was just all the singles, and I convinced my mother to buy me that Elvis album, and that sort of sent me in a completely different direction. But still 45s. I was a kid growing up in the 70s. I was born in 63, so I was a teenager when like these teen bands like the DeFranco Family were coming out. I thought Tony DeFranco was the greatest thing I had ever seen. Kind of funny. But then, and then when I got my license and started driving again, everything sort of changed. I discovered beer, girls, and right about that time, while I was in high school, I heard about Bruce. I think I even, I think I tweeted this not too long ago, that my first reaction to Springsteen was it's a cult, and you people are weird. You love it way too much. There's no way anything could be that good. And for years, like from sophomore all the way through senior year, I just refused to listen to it because I just thought it was over the top.
Well, I could think of people, growing up in, let's say, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Majority of them are going to be Dallas Cowboy fans, right? It's their parents were and their grandparents were, and that's where you grow up, you're doing that. But a small percentage rebels, right? Like, hey, everyone else likes these. I'm going to find something else. I'm going to be, whether it's a Washington fan or, like Tampa Bay or just something just to do. So there is that where you're kind of rebelling.
Yeah.
And also, well, if everyone's saying it's that good, well, come on, it can't be. And every once in a while, I don't know about you, Vinny, but you'll hear about a movie. Oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. And you kind of go in there with a little bit of chip on your shoulder, like, okay, right? Yeah, prove me. And then sometimes it is. The latest thing that happened to me was Ted Lasso. Right? Like, I don't know if you've watched the show.
I haven't. I've been avoiding it because of that very reason.
Exactly. And I will tell you, I do not think you will be disappointed. But for that very reason is like, okay, let's see how good this is. And you're like, oh my goodness, it really is that good.
It really is that good. Yeah.
So when did you quote unquote join the cult?
The summer of my senior year, so it was 81.
Okay.
I started dating a girl that I would eventually marry, and she was completely into Bruce. She looked the part, sitting on the hood of Dodge, drinking a warm beer in a soft summer rain. And a girl, just was amazing. And she had the Winterland, I think it was the Winterland bootleg, I think, on vinyl in her room. And we would, and I don't know, something about the song Drive All Night just sent me over the edge, right? The Drive All Night song, it had a skip in it. And so it was like just this thing that got me, and between her and the music, and within a month, I was at one of the River shows. And so, I went with her and a friend of mine, Lou, and a couple other people. And that was it. I was off to the races.
All she wrote.
That was all she wrote at that point.
I've said this many times, Vinny, that two kinds of people that go to their first Bruce show and go, damn, that was long. And then the others who go, oh my goodness, when can I do this again?
Yes.
Right. And so, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I've lost jobs. I mean, they weren't great jobs. Like when I was in high school and shortly after, I was pumping gas. I pumped gas at 12 different stations because I got fired for every one for just not showing up so I can go to a Springsteen concert. So funny, but yeah, I was so.
So, back when he was doing the book signings, he did all the East Coast side, and they announced he was going to be in Austin, Texas in November. And I had just started a new job. I mean, just started a new job, had not been in the job probably 2 weeks when they announced this. And it was a good job. Like, to give you a little background, I had spent 9 months unemployed looking for a job, got a job that paid, 60 cents on the dollar to what I was making, did that for a year, then got this new job that was 80% of what I used to make, so significant. And so what I did is I said, okay, well, there's no way I'm going to get a ticket. But I went online, bought a ticket and got one.
That's great.
And so I'm like, okay, I might be able to convince my boss, but there's no freaking way I'm going to convince my wife that I should do this, right? And so when I started the job, there were like 4 open recs. It was a tech support center. And then someone quit, and then there were 5 open recs. And so we had gone in and we got a bunch of resumes. And so I called a bunch of people and I said, by the way, you don't have to do this, but I'm not going out of town for Thanksgiving. So the Friday after Thanksgiving, if you want to come in and interview, I'll be here in the building. And if you don't, that's fine. We'll do this next week. This is just, I was
Right.
trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I ended up having 7 or 8 people come and interview. So I was telling my boss that Monday after Thanksgiving, I said, yeah, Joel, I ended up talking to people. He goes, really? You worked on that Friday? I said, yeah. He said, well, like if you want a day off, and let me know. Well, it just so happens. And he said, oh, well, then you've got to go. Absolutely. So I did. I ended up like, it was December 1st. And it was like, I got up that morning, drove straight to Austin, stood in line, got my book signed, got my picture with him, and then drove back home and was at work the next day. Right.
Awesome.
But yeah, it was, just crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy the stuff you do, right? I mean, I didn't have an opportunity to go to the book signing. I tried to get into that. I don't know if do you remember that Q&A thing he did? I think
yeah.
Massachusetts, didn't get a ticket for that. And
So,
I live in Asbury.
I was
10
going to
minutes
ask,
away
have you
from
run into him?
Manasquan.
No, you've
No,
not run into him. No.
no, I'm like Bruce repellent. He just knows I'm around him. So it hasn't happened yet.
And I got to tell you that I would have that in mind. Like I'd be like looking at like, oh, is that a Range Rover? Right? Is that like,
right.
Oh, no, somebody else. Yes, it's because you never know, because you see the pictures look like he's in the wild now that, the things have slowed down a little bit. So that's hilarious.
I mean, he spends a lot of time hanging out in Manasquan, near the inlet, and
Yeah.
I don't live very far from there. It's so random though, you know what I mean?
It is.
Really random. I mean, there's so many stories I have of like, that story of Bruce where he climbed the wall of Graceland, and
Yeah.
And I mean, in 1986, when right after he married Julianne, the girl that I mentioned earlier, and who I hadn't married yet, we baked him a congratulations cake, him and Julianne, and we brought it to his house in Rumson and parked the car down the street and brought dog biscuits because I heard he had dogs. And we snuck up his lawn, hiding behind trees with this cake, and made it all the way to his front door and knocked on the door. And the security guard was in the car in the driveway and didn't see us and came out and said, he's not home. If he was home, he would answer the door. He's not home. And we sat on the roof of the car and ate the cake with the security guard and left. But I mean, I have.
I mean, that is exactly what Bruce did with Graceland. I mean, right?
Exactly,
Except
yes.
he and little Steven didn't have a cake, but except for that. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Funny. Yeah. So, I mean, it didn't have a happy ending, but it was fun.
No.
Anyway, so, and then there was in '99, I went to one of the reunion shows in Cleveland. I went to all three Cleveland.
Yeah.
Over two, I can't remember. I think it was the 14th and 15th of November, something like that. And I stayed in the same hotel as the band.
Okay.
And in fact, we paid for suites. And so my buddy Kevin and I, who played the acoustic guitar, we had access to the hospitality suite at the top of, I think it was the Fairmont, right?
Yeah.
So the first morning we go up there, we're like, let's go hang out in the hospitality suite. Kevin brings his guitar and we're sitting on the couch, and in walks Nils and little Steven and Danny. I mean, they just came in, they went to the little bar, got some orange juice, got a little muffin, and they walked out. And Kevin and I were like, what just happened? We were frozen. We were just frozen on the couch in the hospitality suite. So we're like, okay, we're going to camp out here now. I guess we're not.
Yeah, leaving. Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So not only that, but we started playing songs, and people and he was playing Springsteen songs. So we would sit there on the couch drinking beer all day, singing acoustic Springsteen songs, to the point where Terry, his security guy,
right,
came in and poked his head in and said, Bruce can hear this shit. This nonsense has to stop. Like, and so we stayed up there, but we lost the guitar at that point.
How hilarious!
We're like, I wonder if Bruce can hear this. But we learned a lot about. I got pictures with Steven and got a chat with the band. And,
that's great.
We watched the masseuse come rolling down the hallway before one of the shows to Bruce's room, gave him this massive massage before one of the shows, and left. And then they snuck Bruce out of the room and through the kitchen, and then down out through the thing. And my friend and I were running through the kitchen after him, trying to catch up with him.
Bruce, yeah.
Bruce, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, you know, I've been sort of.
Well,
You know,
you've at least
a
gotten to
little bit
meet
of a
some of the,
stalker.
you got to meet some of the bands, so that's
Yes,
good.
that was cool.
And as we're recording this, Little Steven's book came out today, you know,
Yeah.
so I'm excited about getting to read that.
You're actually missing the interview. There was a live stream tonight.
I did see that, and I, you know, I thought about it because you could pay for it and then stream it later.
Okay.
And I went, no, I think I'm okay, because
Right.
I had I've already ordered, you know, I had ordered it from Amazon, and then I ordered the Kindle version too. So I ordered the hardback and the Kindle, and I went to go. I said, you know, I should go and get the autographed copy, and I
Right.
saw that Amazon had already shipped it. I'm like, well, okay,
Yeah.
I'll go with it.
Yeah, he's doing that Miami Steve thing, right? He's
Yeah,
signing some of them as Miami
he
Steve.
is. Yes, he is.
I got myself.
One of the questions, my buddy Sam, a year or so ago, I was lucky enough to have Maureen Van Zandt on the podcast.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and she was really nice. And I said, did you marry Little Steven or Miami Steve? And that was my buddy Sam's question. And she said, I started dating Miami Steve. I ended up marrying Little Steven. I said, okay, that's a perfect answer. That's a perfect answer. So Vinnie, I always like to preface this. You kind of talked a little bit about this. The number of times you've seen Bruce is not a fair barometer of what kind of fan you are, but do you count how many times you've seen him? Have you got a count?
I mean, I stopped counting at 150 or so.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it's much more than that.
Okay.
You know, most of those shows have happened since the reunions.
Okay.
Though, because I could not afford to go to something as a young, you know. But yeah. I mean, I have a terrible memory. There's some moments that stick out. You know, the birthday show in Philadelphia, when he played the recording of his mother.
Yeah.
That was one of the shows where you sort of walk out and you're just looking at the people as you're walking out saying, I can't believe what I just saw. Do you believe what we just saw? That was incredible.
Wow.
The crowd just walked out in disbelief at how good that show was. And
yeah,
you know, he does that, you know, a lot, but
yeah,
that was one that really stood out for me.
Yeah. If you had to choose, do you like better when it's the E Street Orchestra with all the horns and the background singer, or do you like it when it's the stripped down only 12 people on the stage that's the E Street Band?
Yeah, I mean, I love both. I have to say I love the garage band version of Bruce the best, and no dig at Patty. I've grown to like and enjoy Patty, and her music. But I think there's something about Bruce when he's on stage without Patty and he's just with the boys that then, you know, kicks it up a notch. I love the influence that Morello had on the band.
Yeah.
And I love the influence that Jay Weinberg had on the band when he was playing a couple of shows, and he did the was it the Christmas shows? There were some shows that he did that were back the band. I can't remember what that, but I saw them at Convention Hall. And that show that I saw at Convention Hall with Jay on drums was just different. And Max is obviously Max, but I mean, there's something about other musicians tweaking Bruce that really I sort of dig, you know.
Yeah, you know, a couple of people, including my buddy Sam, was like, well, anything that needs to be done, Niels can play it or Bruce could play it. I don't see why you need Morella. I didn't mind, and in fact, I enjoyed the enthusiasm because you could tell how much Tom Morello was enjoying playing with them. I mean, just this was like a little kid, like, okay, I get to play with this band. It's hilarious.
It's amazing. As a matter of fact, he said that there's no one else he would play number two to outside of Bruce Springsteen. Like if anybody else asked him to play in their band, he would say no. Bruce is the only guy that he would play for, which is
absolutely. Do a couple other stories? Do you have a couple other stories from shows?
I wrote a couple down on the board behind you. just so
Okay.
I remember. You know, there was I was working with my girlfriend again. Before marriage, she worked for WDHA, the radio station in North Jersey.
Yeah.
And we went together on behalf of the radio station to the show in 1985 in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I guess it was RFK,
Okay.
if I remember right. And we were looking to get people to interview on the radio. So we had one of the Curtis K, I believe, was that. For those people in New Jersey that are listening to this, you'll recognize the DHA K, who recently passed, unfortunately. Really good guy. He was doing the show from RFK, and my girlfriend Phyllis and I were walking around the area where the bands and their guests were hanging, looking for people. So we got Amy Bitton on the air. We got out in the suite next to us was Michael Douglas, who was making out with some girl who wasn't his wife. We were like, wow, that's Michael Douglas in that suite next to us watching Bruce making out with some girl. But anyway, we got Bill Murray on the air. Bill said, we said, hey, Bill, a couple of minutes on the air. He's like, why do you want me to do that? I want to watch the show. Just leave me alone. We're like,
Yeah.
Please, just a couple minutes. So he came on. And if I remember that show Bruce did, he went back into his catalog to Born to Run, and did some older songs, which at the time I didn't really know. I mean, I was 22.
Right.
I was Born to Run, and after I knew some of the bigger songs in the first 2 albums, but Lost in the Flood. Lost in the Flood came on one time when I was about that same time, early 20s, and I didn't even know it was Bruce.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how far I had to go, in my fandom.
Yeah.
I didn't even know the song.
Vinny, did you get a chance to go to Broadway either time?
I went one show on each run.
Very nice.
Yes, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just what do you say? It's so good.
You didn't have to choose, but was there one you preferred over the other?
I thought the recent show was probably better. Better is such a weird word. I mean, it was different. It had a lot more. I felt like Bruce learned from the first run, used the moment to add, different ending, and it just felt. I felt more emotion. And the duets with Patty this time around were phenomenal. Fire was smoking hot, sexy. I mean, that was made. Did you get a chance to see it?
So no, I went to the first time. I was able to get a ticket, and through the grace of my lovely bride, I was able to go fly into New York, see the show, came home the next day, and was then when the second round was announced, she looked at me and I said, nope, I'm not going to ask. I said, my hope is he doesn't change a note because I'm going to be jealous if he does. I said, but, and I am hoping, I guess Landau said that they are going to do something. They will do something for people who didn't get to see it, that they're doing some, I don't know if they're going to film. I don't know how they're going to do it. Peter Cianca from Blogness on the Edge of Town said the same thing, that he thought the first one was a better all-around show because, it was very scripted and it was really, really, he started at one point and then closed that loop. But the second one, he said, was a lot of emotion and in a lot of ways funnier and better. So I think it's good that he kind of stretched himself again and did this a new way.
I agree with you. That's a good assessment. The first run was much more Broadway. Second run.
Absolutely.
That's sort of how I looked at it.
And I still am. I think he won't, but I still think it would be a great idea for him to set up for a limited run at London's West End. Just because he has such a huge fan base in Europe, and just to have that experience of doing that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool. But knowing Bruce, though, he would want to make it appropriate for London, and
Yeah.
it would be special for London, right?
Yeah, it would be.
Which would draw me, on an
Yes. Now
airplane.
that you're like, okay, now I've got to go that.
Exactly.
Now you said you've never got to see him overseas.
I never got to see him overseas. No,
Yeah.
it is on the short list though, and
Yeah.
I every time I listen to him play Milan, I mean, I just can't believe the crowd and the emotion. Sometimes I'm embarrassed by my fellow Jersey crowds at some of the shows I go to be honest with you. I think they have expectations that are through the roof. They don't respond, the way that, I would expect a Bruce crowd to respond. And when I listen to the Europeans, the emotion and it's an event,
Yeah.
And back in the day, I used to they say seeing Bruce is kind of like going to watch a prize fight. And I remember in the 80s and the 90s through the reunion tour, and still now to some degree, when you walk into a Bruce show, you feel like you're about to walk in and you're just going to be bloody walking out. Like you want to be bloodied. You want to go in,
yes,
leave exhausted, and as if you were just in a battle with the band, like just together, right? I feel like Europe still is able to pull that off, but it doesn't really happen that often.
I will give you your brethren some credit. I've seen him mostly in Texas, but I've gone to a few shows. I've done Kansas City, I did Nashville, we did Cleveland and Louisville, but during the second half of the River Tour, after he went to Europe and he came back, and he did that 2 nights at MetLife, and then he went and came back and did the third. Well, I was on there that second night. I was the night when the guy asked his fiance to marry him, right?
Yeah.
And my son came with me, and he had only seen him one other time. He had seen him in Oklahoma City with me, and we both were really impressed that the energy of him being in front of his quote unquote home crowd, that this year. And that's so far the only time that, it was almost 4 hours. We had, we had incidents starting out, and then we got to hear, a couple other things with strings, and then when he did Jersey Girl and the proposal and the fireworks, I looked at Chris and I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I mean, like, usually when I walk out of the show, if he wanted to do one more, I'd love it. And this time I was like, I'd gone to the all you eat buffet. I was totally like, I couldn't eat another bite. And for the first time ever, I was like, this is perfect. And then immediately, like the next day you're like, okay, I want to see him again. But at that moment of, I was sated.
Yeah. That was at the 2016. I saw, I will give props to my Jersey crowd for that live show. That was an amazing. I was in the pit for that show. Just before the 4-hour Philly show. I think we broke the record.
Yeah, and then they immediately broke it. Yes.
Right. That MetLife show was just off the charts. Yes.
Yeah. Great. Well, Tougher Than the Rest is one of my son's favorite songs. He played that. And Jack of All Trades with the strings was just it was just a really, really strong show. That's awesome. So what are your thoughts about like Letter to You and Western Stars, his last 2 releases?
Yeah, it's just such a gift to get that music from
that is the perfect word, Vinny.
It's just a gift. I feel like, I was lucky enough to have him, everybody says the soundtrack of your life thing, right? But he's actually now taking us into old age along with him. And and I am so grateful for that, because I could use the help and sort of like his own reflections on his own life in Western Stars, and or through his character I resonate so much with me as I get older. And then to turn that around with this love letter back to us called Letter to You about, how he's devoted his life to just pouring his soul onto a piece of paper. And I mean, he has such an awareness for what would resonate with his fans, and he's able to pull it off with great music and lyrics. I can't, it's just hard. I can't believe it. Like, where's the end of this? I mean, he's just.
Well, I say this when I'm talking to someone, and I got upset, but someone on Facebook right after Letter to You posted, he needs to quit putting out new material because he's tarnishing his legacy. And I went, okay, you're an idiot.
Right.
You're an effing idiot. Because first off, I don't know what he could do to tarnish his image, right?
Not much.
Yeah,
A felony of some sort, maybe.
yeah, I guess so.
About
Yeah.
that.
And I said, because, and that's fine if you don't like the album. There have been, I mean, I know people who love the Seeger sessions. I'm
Right.
I don't dislike it. It's just not one of those things. But, and I was very vocal about this, Vinny, that I live in Texas. We are so red
Yep.
that it is just, and I am,
My
my wife,
condolences.
exactly, my wife and I are just, blueberries in this huge vat
Yeah.
of strawberries. And I said, if we could get a new Springsteen album and a new president, 2020 would not be the worst year ever.
Right.
And to not just get a new album, but to get such a loving album, like, as you said, this talking about his career, and I certainly agree with a lot of people that said, I don't think this is his last album, but if it was, what a really good bookend.
Right.
Though I do think that, I'm 62, so I'm a little bit older than you, but you and I graduated 77. So, we're,
Close.
yeah,
Yep.
you were a freshman when I was a senior, probably, that's, yeah. And to reach this creative heights at this time in his career is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You're 71 and you're putting out this album. Now, Dylan has had a good year, and I understand that's the way things work, but it is just really something beautiful.
It's something beautiful, and there's no reason to believe that a guy who's been prolific for his entire life won't continue to be, right? I mean, if he doesn't, he doesn't, but and at this point in our journey with him, whatever he decides to do, he does, and I'm 100% in. You got to believe that at some point he's going to start to slow. I mean, he's going to have to slow down. He's been Superman, but will the Letter to You tour be 4 hours a show? I highly doubt it. I mean, Patty, I think, would kick his ass if he tries to go over 3 hours. Like, at some point, his wife is going to say,
well, and I do think that the days of back-to-back shows are gone. They will have at least a day or two between shows. I do think he seems to take good care of himself, nutritionally wise. Has a pretty solid workout regime, and I bet, similar to my wife and I went through a phase where, because of Lance Armstrong, we were following the Tour de France, right? And then this past year, with we still kind of being locked in, we ended up watching again. And, these riders not only have this great nutrition, but they have this massage therapist. And you talked about that, right? So, that Bruce and the band are getting the very best
care,
pre and post concert care possible to help them.
100%.
But I'm okay. If it's a 2.5 hour show, if it's a 2 hour show, I don't care. I mean, just whatever you want to give me, Bruce.
Exactly. I mean, he's the only guy left that does this. So I saw this past weekend, I saw Jane's Addiction and The Offspring, and I saw Cheap Trick, and they're, granted it was a festival, but they're only doing 2 hours or an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, Jason Isbell on Friday night. I saw Jason Isbell on Friday night. It's been quite a couple of weeks. He did 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, Bruce is an anomaly. He's just,
yeah. And I think most shows are 90 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That I know when I went to see the Eagles, it was the Hotel California anniversary tour. So the first part of the show was they played Hotel California in its entirety.
Wow.
Then they took a 15-minute break, and then they came back, did a greatest hits set, went off stage, then did a quick encore. And they started at 8:05 and they were right at 11:05 because
Wow.
Henley had said, for 3 hours, we want you to not worry about what's out there. For 3 hours, he says that crap's all going to be out there tomorrow. He said, for tonight, we just want you to not think about all the stuff that's going out there. And so, but including breaks in there. So I was pretty impressed with them.
That's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. But they have 4 lead singers.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Like it's not every song isn't Bruce. Now,
and it's not physical. And I mean, Bruce's show is physical.
Yes,
I mean,
he is.
That's a physical show. He's not standing behind the microphone singing for 3 hours. And
you do wonder, and it would be a different kind of show, but Steven and Niels and Jake and even Gary and Patty all have individual work. So you could see them, okay, we're going to do a 3.5 hour show, but we're also going to have Niels do lead on a couple songs and, Gary, and I would be fine with that.
I would be fine with that. I have a hard time believing Bruce would do that. I think
I agree.
He go the size of,
Yes.
I think I don't see it. He doesn't like to share the stage with anybody unless it's,
Because I always thought about that, about because you'll often see, like, one of my first shows I went to was Willie Nelson, right? And he would have different people in bands sing lead. They'd take a chance, and you're always like, well, Bruce would do that. Nope. Bruce, it is Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the closest they get is Out on the Street, when he goes, out on the street, Susie, and then Susie gets to sing a line, or Out on the Street, Stephen, and they get to sing a line.
Or if I should walk behind,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when they did that. Yes, that's good.
It's calculated, though. It's very calculated. It's
very calculated. Talk to me about albums and songs that have meant a lot to you over the years.
Oh yeah. I mean, early on for me, it was really the Born to Run album that I listened to over and over again. I know I love The River. It was my introduction to Bruce, and those songs like Cadillac Ranch, which my buddy quoted in his high school yearbook, and
that's nice.
That album is special, but that, lying on the couch with the headphones on and the Born to Run vinyl on, and listening to those songs. I mean, one of my favorite things. I mean, Bruce is fun, but he's one of the most romantic writers. He can write in that way better than anybody, and I love that type of music from Bruce. So when I went back to the first 2 albums, I mean, that's one of the things that I absolutely loved about those songs.
Yeah.
And, some of the most romantic songs he's ever written. But and then the Magic album, honestly, Magic and Wrecking Ball, let's forget about Western Stars and Letter to You for a second, because they're just like, moonbeams that came down from the heavens, right? I mean, Wrecking Ball and Magic to me are the 2 albums in the last 20 years or so that I really love more than anything.
Well, and I've told this story multiple times on the podcast, so listeners, I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But I had a guy joining me, and if I've talked to people like yourselves that are longtime fans, they usually nod their head as we're talking to them. He said, I was at the reunion show going, this is it. This is as good as it's ever going to be. They broke up, they've come back, they've performed. I don't think Bruce will ever be a greatest hits act, but they're going to go do other things. And, we've seen the best that's ever is. Maybe every couple of years we'll get a tour, but that's it. He said, he goes, I think back to that guy and I want to go, you have no
What the
idea what's
hell?
coming. You have
Exactly.
no idea what's coming.
Yeah.
You have The Rising, you have Wrecking Ball, you have Broadway, you have an autobiography book. I mean, you have
Yeah.
just, on and on.
I mean, it's the tale of two lifetimes, really. I mean,
Yes.
he had everything up until 87, and
Yeah.
then what I consider solo stuff, in
Yeah.
the 90s. Even Human Touch and Lucky Town, to me, I
Yeah.
consider more solo than anything
Sure.
else. So I mean, he bookended it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's 20 years of some of the most prolific, wonderful music.
I often think about, how painters like Picasso has periods,
Right.
and now you talk about you could make this whole, and it would be there, scholars could spend hours debating what are the different phases of Springsteen. Is this, this is the Broadway era, or is this, what do you like, the rising Renaissance, and what do you, like all
Yeah.
this different things. And, it's just
Yeah.
crazy.
It is crazy, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's something coming next. There is,
Yes.
even if it's personal and stripped down.
Yeah.
I just know that he's going to go out strong. And
Yeah, I agree too.
there's no reason to not believe that. I mean, he is.
No, and in fact, I don't think he will do this, but I think of Johnny Cash with the Rick Rubin American recordings, right? Where Cash just sat there with the guitar and Rubin said, just play songs you want to love.
Right.
And some of them were great, some of them were but
Yeah.
as a whole, you're like, what a brilliant way for Johnny Cash to end his career.
Yes.
And I don't think that's what Bruce has in mind, because he doesn't think he's that good of a vocalist.
Right.
But I'm excited about what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Over 100 shows, over 150 shows.
Mhm.
Is there anything you're still chasing? Is there any songs that you haven't got to hear live that you want to?
I mean, honestly, not really at this
Okay.
point. I mean, I want the Letter to You tour.
Sure.
I want to
obviously.
hear Western Stars music live too.
Yeah.
And so I hope he does some of those songs in there also. But yeah, there's really nothing. I mean, nothing really that I haven't heard.
So I've asked this for a couple of people, and this is just pure speculation on your part, and maybe a wish list on your part. When he tours, it's going to have been over a year since Letter to You came out at the best, right? Do you think he will treat that as like with the Magic tour? Like Magic came out, they toured, and there was a heavy.
So will it be a Letter to You tour? Is that what you're asking?
Or is it?
100%.
You think so, huh?
I do. I think it will be, and I think if you go back to Darkness, right? Didn't Darkness come out, and then he was in legal trouble, and he couldn't get out on the road, and so the album was out for a while. If I could be mistaken. I mean, by the way, the people that you have on your show, the level of Bruce knowledge is just freakish. I thought I was a fan until I listened to your podcast, and I'm like, holy smokes. I just don't. I mean, so I could have this completely wrong, but I think Darkness.
I know what you're saying.
And
someone brought up, who knows? He may have another album that he wants to release, and that's going to be the yet to be named album tour, right?
Right.
But I do hope he throws in a couple of Western Stars songs if it is a Letter to You. I certainly think there's plenty in there that would work great with the E Street Band. That's good.
I agree. I mean, I'm taking bets now that he opens with Burn and Train. As a matter of fact, I had there's a guy on Twitter that transcribes Springsteen songs, and I play in this band through the local music school here in Asbury, and I'm bringing Burn and Train to the band. We have a three song gig at the Stone Pony in November.
Oh, nice.
I'm gonna play Burn and Train on that stage at the Stone Pony before Bruce gets a chance to.
Yes. I thought Burning Train would open it too, but I now suspect Ghost will be what they kick off.
Well, that's a good guess too.
I thought Burning Train was. I think that's what my mind for the longest time when I heard that, just I think that energy starting would be great.
It would be great. Yes. That D chord ringing out in the beginning.
Oh, it's
What I
just
want to hear.
amazing.
You know, with the
Yes.
lights out,
Oh yeah.
the D chord, the Burning Train, and then they just rip into Burning Train. That would be heaven.
I'm ready. I'm ready now. Is there anything I should have asked you that I hadn't, Vinny?
Oh, this has been a great conversation. Yeah,
Yeah, good.
I could talk about this all day, but yeah.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
will have you on again. I will
Thank you.
definitely. Um, so before I let you go, we got to ask you the Mary question. So for
Right.
those of you who are friends with Vinny and you're listening to this podcast, first, thank you. Your guy did great. But I end every podcast with the Mary question. Jay Armstrong, who is in the Philadelphia area, is an honors English teacher that just recently retired.
Mhm.
And he would take his seniors and they would spend 2 days in the honors English class, breaking apart Thunder Road, treating it like a poem, looking at the
Yep.
imagery, looking at the lyrics, compare it to Robert Frost. And then at the end of the 2 days, he asked his class, does Mary get in the car? Vinny,
Right.
that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
There is no question that she gets in the car. I mean,
Okay.
this song is a guy's. He pulls out all the stops to convince her to get in the car. I mean, every single stanza of that song is another reason why she needs to get in the car. I mean, he laid it all out there. If she doesn't get in the car, I have no faith in humanity. I'll tell you.
Okay, there you go.
She got in the car.
Very
No doubt.
nice.
Right after her dress waved. She got in.
Oh, there you go. If someone wants to reach you, are you on social media?
I am on Twitter. Yes.
Okay.
TRIPVIN.
Go ahead, say again.
TRIPVIN.
Okay. All right. Very nice. Vinny, this was great. I hope you had fun.
That was great.
We appreciate it so much.
Keep going. Your stamina is amazing. Keep it going.
Well, I am trying. I keep going.
It is Bruce-like. You are
yes.
Bruce.
Well, it is. Thank you. That's nice of you to go. I just love talking Bruce with people, so it's pretty easy. Listeners, you please go get vaccinated. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Remember to social distance. Let's all be good to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.